Well, good afternoon, everyone. Um, Glad to have you here. My name is Richard Kahlenberg. I'm a senior fellow at the Century Foundation, and I'm a member of the board of the Albert Shanker Institute. And I want to welcome you all for our discussion this afternoon, School Integration by Race and Class, a Movement Reborn, question mark. So sitting here in Washington, D.C., as we are, under the reign of Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos, it's easy to be pessimistic about the future of school integration in this country, or indeed the future of public education. But thankfully, we have four panelists today who are here to inspire us. And during these dark times, we can thank God that the founders established a federalist system that is especially active in the area of public education, where 90% of funding comes from state and local entities, and where our decisions are primarily driven at that state and local level. So we're at a moment where there's some momentum around the school integration issue. Just yesterday, New York City released, for the first time in its history, a concrete plan with measurable goals and timetables for reducing racial and economic segregation. I think many of us could quibble with the aggressiveness of the program, but this is a sea change from the prior administration of Bloomberg and Klein, who essentially said school integration was impossible in New York City. Last week, the Center for American Progress released an important report on socioeconomic integration, finding, among other things, that 70% of Americans want to see action on this issue, want to see a reduction in the gap between rich and poor in schools. The day after Donald Trump's election, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, where many of us were kind of in a state of bewilderment, but the school board voted 9-0 to adopt a socioeconomic school integration plan for their magnet schools. And New York and Charlotte are part of what my colleague Kimberly Quick, who's here, and Hallie Potter have called a new wave of school integration. Many feared that in 2007, when the Supreme Court, in a wrong-headed decision, suggested you can't use race in student admissions in the way that those two districts had, that it would spell the end to integration generally. But in fact, we now have 100 school districts and charter school chains that are consciously seeking to bring kids of different backgrounds together through socioeconomic as well as racial integration. These districts educate 4.4 million students in 32 states. One thing that appears to be driving this is frustration and fatigue with the idea that we can make separate but equal work. And the people on this panel have known that for a long time, but it's now becoming a consensus point for people on the extremes of the debates in education. So Michelle Rhee and Diane Ravitch, who probably don't agree on any other issue, have suggested that school integration ought to be a priority. So we have a terrific panel to discuss these issues. I'm going to introduce them, and then they're each going to speak for 15 minutes. I will begin with the former U.S. Secretary of Education, John B. King, Jr., who now serves as President and CEO of the Education Trust. Prior to serving as U.S. Secretary of Education, he was Deputy Secretary of Education. Before that was the New York State Education Commissioner. I have called on other occasions Secretary King the LeBron James of school integration. Although maybe I should say he's the Seth Curry. Uh, Sorry, I didn't mean to get into some controversy there. Either way, he did more to raise the profile of the school segregation issue than any Secretary of Education in the history of the department. So we're very pleased to have him here. Next will be Gary Orfield, who is a professor of research at UCLA and is co-director of the UCLA Civil Rights Project. He is a giant in the area of school integration and is a mentor to countless people toiling in this field. Next, we will hear from Ann Owens, who is an assistant professor of sociology at the University of Southern California. She has conducted very important research on income and racial segregation, and we're looking forward to hearing from her. And finally, we will hear from Johanna Josephat, who is the founding teacher at the Urban Assembly Unison School in Brooklyn, which is doing really important work around school integration. And I think it's highly appropriate that a teacher is batting cleanup on this panel because of the important role that teachers really have played in school integration fights throughout the country. And there are a number of districts from La Crosse, Wisconsin to Louisville, Kentucky, where teachers have been at the forefront of pushing for school integration because they know they can do a better job of educating kids in diverse environments. And I'll just close by saying the AFT in particular has a very proud history on this issue. They were the only education organization to file an amicus brief in the Brown versus Board of Education decision in support of desegregation. A longtime president, Albert Shanker, was a strong supporter of magnet schools and integration, and today Randy Weingarten continues to be a champion of school integration. So each of the panelists will speak for 15 minutes to be followed by question and answer. You all have little note cards on which you can address your questions, and we'll be picking those up later. And before I forget it, our hashtag is segregation. I get that right? Okay, good.